In today's video, we're exploring online and digital resources for starting a truly individualized sweater knitting journey. So if that sounds like just your cup of tea, get cozy and let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Wool Needles Hands Midweek Ramble. My name is Taylor, and I will be your host. For today's video, I am sharing with you some of my favorite places to go online when it comes to supercharging my inspiration to individualize, modify, or improvise sweaters for myself. In other words, sweaters that I knit for myself. I think that as knitters, we become really comfortable with knitting from a pattern, but it's really important that as our skill set grows, that we begin to work outside of the box or outside of the lines of the pattern to further individualize patterns for ourselves. Because I think you'll find that as you become a more proficient knitter, your needs for personalization grow naturally. You know what you want, you know what you like, and you may not be able to find one pattern that provides all of that, and having some kind of insight to help you on your journey of individualizing, modifying, or improvising your own knits is really a very powerful and empowering thing. If you've been here for any length of time, you know that I love to improvise hand knits, especially when it comes to top-down sweaters, especially because those are the easiest ones to improvise. I'm actually doing it right now. We are improvising a sweater over on the Wool Needles Hands Patreon group. If you'd like to get involved with that, it is a knit along that we're doing over there. You can learn more about that. I will link to it down below. And I have done it before with a first iteration of that particular sweater. This is called my Frankensweater. This is an improvised top-down sweater. And actually, I just recently dug up an article, or I should say a blog post that I wrote back in 2016 on my old Greenhorn Knitter blog. I found it by researching for this video. It actually popped up in my Google search, which I thought was a throwback and quite funny. But I found that post where I did my first ever improvised top-down raglan sweater. I'll link to the post down below if you're curious. It was a long time ago. It was 2016. It wasn't that long ago. But I found that, and that kind of talks a little bit about my first foray into improvisation and individualization of a knitting pattern. I love it. I love being able to add my own individual spin to something. And this isn't to say that knitting from a pattern is becoming faux pas, or that you shouldn't knit from a published pattern, or that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that if you're already an established knitter and you know how to knit from a pattern, why not figure out how to liberate yourself from a pattern and knit something that's perfectly individualized? Because you can. Not because there's anything wrong with knitting from a pattern. I mean, hell, come on, we're all knitting from knitting patterns because knitwear designers know what they're doing and it makes it easier for us, and we love to explore other people's creative designs. But having that power to knit something truly individual for yourself is just, it's the bee's knees. And if you've never knit a sweater before, diving down the rabbit hole to learn how a sweater is constructed and how you can modify or individualize a sweater for yourself is like a supercharged workshop in sweater knitting, and it would make you that much more strong of a sweater knitter moving forward. So that's my whole spiel about this. Everything that I share with you today is online. Of course, there are books upon books upon books about designing your own sweaters, improvising sweaters, modifying sweaters, knitting sweaters without tears, tons of printed books. And I have a video coming about such books that I find to be my favorites in the very near future. But for today, we're talking about everything that you can find by a click of a button or several tippy taps of a keyboard right there on the internet. And a bonus to all of that, at the very end of this video, as a little bonus, I'm going to share with you my favorite online resource for individualizing your own sock pattern. I know socks aren't sweaters, but well, they're sweaters for your feet. And I think it's really important to be able to have your own individualized sock pattern. And so in the spirit of modification, individualization, I'm going to share with you my favorite resource for just that at the very end of the episode. But without further ado, let me share with you my first resource to check out if you have an interest in coming up with your own individual sweater pattern. Okay, the first one is an article from Knitty.com. I don't know if you're familiar with Knitty. It's been around for quite a while, and it's one of my favorite online resources for little bits of information about knitting. This particular article is called Knit by Numbers, and it's by Julie Thacker. Thacker or Thaker, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that last name. But what this is here is an article that talks to you about how you can create your own sweater pattern by using percentages. Now, if you've heard of the percentage sweater or Elizabeth Zimmerman's method for knitting sweaters using a percentage breakdown, this will be very familiar to you. It's not a long article. There's not a ton here. It's very cut and dry, and that's why I love it. I'm going to pop it up on the screen. You can kind of get a gist of it. I'm not going to read through the whole article. You'll see just how brief it is, but you can be sure it provides just what you need to knit yourself a top-down raglan sweater that fits you based on your gauge, on your size, and all of that. It's just a real quick bite-sized way to get you started into knitting your very own sweater and to help affirm the whole idea that you don't need a pattern that somebody else wrote to knit your own sweater. And it's actually funny because it says right here, the very first paragraph, and I think about this all the time. In the dark and mysterious past, knitters didn't have Debbie Bliss or Elizabeth Levold telling them, cast on 50 stitches, work in pattern, ... For most of knitting history, the idea of a written pattern would have been strange and foreign. What our ancestors did was use a system of proportions and percentages to help them create a knitted garment. Cast on enough stitches to go around the chest. Knit until it was long enough. Bind off 1/3 the width on each side for shoulders and leave the middle third for a neck. Knit some sleeves, slash the armholes, sew them in. There's your traditional knitted Gansey, nothing to it. Now, that does make it seem like she's oversimplifying here. And of course, there are myriad different shapes and styles of sweaters that you can knit. And this is really giving you instructions for just a very basic fitted top-down raglan crewneck sweater. But having that framework there and having those basic instructions is what's going to give you the information you need to further modify and individualize the sweater. It's giving you a masterclass in sweater construction from the top down using a percentage system. Moving forward, if you decide that you want you want a larger percentage for the different portions of the body, that's where your kind of design liberty comes into play. So I definitely recommend checking out this article, Knit by Numbers by Julie Thaker. It's a great jumping off point to start your journey into individualized sweater knitting. Okay, this next one is not an article or something necessarily to read. It's a tool that I use all the time. It's my favorite calculator for knitting increases and decreases and shaping sleeves. And that is the WorldKnits Knitting Increase and Decrease Calculator. It's very simple. You could Google WorldKnits knitting calculator and you'll always find this, but put this in your bookmarks because you're going to want to have it. The reason why I use this, and I'm going to show you here, it's just a simple knitting increase calculator. Use the calculator below to determine how to increase evenly across your row or round of knitting. Same with a knitting decrease calculator. And if you scroll further down, it provides a calculator for increasing your stitches to taper a standard sleeve. To determine the number of rows in the sleeve shaping, complete the following. It gives you the kind of like the algorithm or the formula that you're going to need. And then it gives you some shaping information. And then it provides you with the calculator so you can figure out the interval or the rate at which you're going to be increasing or decreasing to shape the sleeve. It has increasing for a tapered sleeve and decreasing for a tapered sleeve, depending on whether you're knitting from the top down or the bottom up. I absolutely love this one-stop shop for figuring out how to evenly increase or decrease. When I knit sweaters, when I say that like I knit sweaters all the time, when I have knit sweaters, and I have decided to kind of add my own modifications to them. One of the things I like to do is to eliminate any shaping in the sleeves and just knit a straight sleeve. And then when I get down to where the cuff will be, I do what I call and what some other knitters call a rapid decrease. That's where you take the circumference of the arm and you rapidly decrease it down all in one fell swoop to what you need for the circumference of your cuff. Well, when I do that, I have to figure out how to evenly distribute those decreases around the circumference of my sleeve so that they're not, odd and, not evenly distributed. Even distribution, I should say, is really important when you're decreasing or shaping any part of a knitted item. And so what I always do is I come over to the WorldKnits calculator and I add my information, whatever my current stitch count is, whatever I need my stitch count to be once I've decreased, and then it gives me the instructions for that particular decrease round so that all the decreases are even. For example, say that I'm at 56 stitches and I need to decrease 16 stitches. It says number of stitches to decrease. I need to decrease 16 stitches. I will calculate. It gives me a balanced decrease, and it gives me the instructions for a balanced decrease. Knit 1, knit 2 together, knit 2 4 times, knit 2 together, knit 1 7 times, knit 2 together, knit 2 4 times, knit 2 together. And there it is. And that's what I do. And if I'm taking notes down about what I'm doing so that I have kind of my individualized notes on a particular pattern, I just copy that down right into my notes so I know what my decrease is going to be. It works very much the same way for an increase, and then it does something very similar if you're shaping a sleeve. You guys, I love this. It's the only increase and decrease calculator that I use. It's fantastic. So when you get into your improvising and individualizing sweater pattern journey, you're definitely going to need to do increases and decreases and figure out the stitch counts for all of that. And that is going to make that so much easier for you. Okay, this next resource I talk about all the time. And I'm going to tell you right now, nobody who's in charge of any of these resources, the writers of these articles or anything, are giving me any kickback. As far as I know, they don't know that I'm even talking about this. I am just a super fan. And this particular one I'm talking about a lot right now over on the Patreon group where we are working through the Franken-KAL knit along right now. And that is How to Improvise a Top-Down Sweater by the lovely Karen Templer of what was formerly Fringe Association when this blog post came out originally, but is now KT's Slow Closet. It's a fantastic blog if you want to be inspired to not only make your own knitwear, but to make your own clothing or just to be creative in general. I love Karen Templer and I love her blog. And this particular series is what ultimately launched me into the idea of improvising my own sweater way back in 2016 when I wrote that blog post that I told you about. In fact, that's what that blog post is about. It's about my experience working through Karen Templer's tutorial, if you will. This series of tutorials and series of blog posts is so fabulous. It gives you a bite-sized version, or I guess I should say it gives you consolidated information from the greats like Elizabeth Zimmerman, Maggie Roggetti, all of the greats that have contributed to coming up with these top-down sweater designs, individualizing them, figuring out formulas and all of that. Karen Templer consolidates a lot of that fantastic information, and she provides it to you in a way that's easy to understand, easy to navigate. It's not too long-winded. It's everything that you need, and it's really great. The visuals, the photography that she uses are fantastic. If you want to figure out how to knit your own top-down, whether it's a cardigan, a V-neck sweater, a crew neck sweater, whatever it is, please check this out. I recommend it all the time. It's absolutely worth every word on the page. It's fantastic. Okay, this next one is actually an app, and it is a paid for app, and I believe it's $4. I believe it's $4. But I'm going to tell you right now, and I get no kickback from this particular app. It's worth it. It's a one-time fee of $4 or whatever it is, and you always have it as a resource, and that is Stashbot. Now, as you embark on your sweater improvisation journey or individualized sweater knitting journey, you're going to find that you need to come up with a way to determine how much yarn you're going to need to knit your sweater because nobody else is giving you that information. You have to provide that information to yourself based on your gauge swatch, the yarn you're using, all of this. Stashbot does that for you in approximations. It's a fantastic tool. You put in the information that you need in terms of what kind of item you're knitting. You have a choice to do an average length sweater. You can add in the chest circumference of that particular sweater, and then you provide it with your gauge, which is what I'm doing right here. And then it gives you an estimated requirement for the yarn that you need. And you can have that in yards or you can have that in meters. Everything can be metric or customary, imperial, whatever. All of that is there for you. And it gives you a pretty good variety of items that you might be knitting. Just, basic, the most basic items a person might be knitting, from a vest all the way to a pair of socks or even a blanket. And the blanket I feel like is new. I don't remember when I don't know if they've always had blanket. But I love this, especially if you're going to be into coming up with your own patterns, because you're really going to have an idea of how much yarn you're going to need to get yourself started. And this is a fantastic tool for that. So this is Stashbot. You definitely want to have it if you can afford, whatever the cost of a cup of coffee to go purchase Stashbot. You only have to purchase it once. It's good to have in your back pocket or your digital toolkit for those times when you need to come up with how much yarn you're going to need for a sweater pattern that you're coming up with on your own and nobody else is giving you that information. Okay, this next one is another app that you can download on your mobile device, and you have to pay for this. Now, there is a free version, and I'm not 100% sure what you do and don't have access to with the free version. And I do know that you can purchase little elements of this app with one-time fees piecemeal. But if you pay $14.99 US, you have access to the entire app and all of its features. You only pay once. It's not a yearly fee. It's a one-time, essentially $15 US purchase of the app, and you have access to everything it has to offer. So go into this knowing that. However, it's really interesting and super helpful for those of us that are trying to develop our own framework for an individualized sweater, but we want a little bit more help. We want something to do all of that legwork in terms of math for us. And this is really fabulous. So I'm actually going to walk you through this just a little bit. But what I want to do is to go to create a new pattern. Okay, so here's the pattern settings. You can go to the settings guide by clicking here, and it gives you all of the information for all of the different settings. But we're just going to work through this a little bit. Units for measurement, inches. I'm in the United States. We use inches by standard. Needle size system will also be US. I'm going to call this Swanky Sample. Okay. We are knitting in the round from the top down, say. Raglan sleeve style. Sleeve style set to raglan, as this is currently the only option for knitting top down. Other sleeve styles may be available in the future. Age, group, and gender. Choose from the list. Let's do this for men and see what happens. Selected garment, excuse me. Let's do a cardigan, a man's cardigan. Desired fit. We're going to make it oversized fit. Sleeve style set to raglan, as this is currently the only option for knitting. Okay, we already read this. Garment ease is set to 6 inches, but like, what if we want to get crazy and make it 9 inches? I made it 9 inches. Choose a neckline. Ooh. A flat collar, a roll neck, a funnel neck, a V-neck. I prefer a V-neck cardigan. Sleeve type, long sleeves. Sleeve and armhole style is raglan. This is really cool. Watch this. You see where it says raglan line style? If I tap on that, it gives me little pictures of what the different types of raglan line styles you could choose from. You have a wide make one right left, a wide make one increase, a bar increase, yarn overs for little eyelets along the raglan, a narrow increase. This is really cool. So I'm going to go for a yarn over with little eyelets. This is ultimate Frankensweater right here. Okay, the yarn that I'm using. Okay, let's have fun with this. It's floofy, chunky. I don't know what that means. Okay. Needle size. I want to use a size 11. Hello. I am popping in to tell you that in this portion of the video, I'm talking about the yarn, and I call it floofy chunky, and then I go through and it talks about the needle size and the stitch pattern, and I'm assuming that that means for the whole pattern. That's not what that is asking me. It's asking me to provide the information for the yarn so that it can take all of the yarn characteristics into account when it's creating the pattern. So you're going to go ahead and watch me butcher this. I'm just going to continue to not understand what's happening with that. But moving forward with this part where I'm sharing Knits That Fit, which is a fantastic app. I've played around with it a lot since filming this. It is going to take all of that information that you would find on the ball band of your yarn into account, and that's what I'm supposed to be putting in here, where I'm just completely fumbling all of that. So just so you know, I'm aware, but so you know, it is getting all of that yarn information from you, and that section that I'm at right now is actually where you're going to put that information. So I just needed to drop in and make sure you were aware of that. Okay, back to the show. Oh, we have options for stitch pattern. Main stitch pattern. What's our main stitch pattern going to be? You know, let's go for a moss stitch or a seed stitch for our main stitch pattern. This is a hot mess, but you can have fun with this. Tension. We're going to select the number of stitches to make 4 inches. This is assuming that you've done a gauge swatch. Custom stitch pattern options. Center panel with, oh, this is if you're coming up with your own stitch pattern, which I'm not even going to do that right now. Clothing size. This is where you select a clothing size. Oh, chest. Let's say, what? We're going to say that this is large. I'm not really, all standard sizes measurements are adjustable with premium. Okay, body measurements. I'm not exactly certain on that yet. Body measurements, we're going to say this is, I'm going to leave this like it is actually, because I think it's assuming the body measurements based on the ease and a few other things that I've added. Garment measurements, I think it's also making assumptions here for me. You can adjust this if you want, but I think it's going to populate these as you put in the information. Body at full length. For fitted styles, the default is calculated based on the total garment length and the hip and waist measurements. Choose a custom value here to change the shape of the garment. This measurement must not be smaller than the waist measurement. Floofy man cardigan. That's it. That's the only notes I'm including here. Save. Front neckline depth adjusted. Front neck depth has been adjusted to allow for V-neck shaping and is now 7.2 inches. Okay, fine. Okay, swanky sample is our sweater here. It's an oversized cardigan with a V-neck. It has long raglan sleeves. It's meant to fit a 42.5-inch chest with 9 inches of ease. That's a small man. It could be okay. The yarn is called Floofy Chunky, and we're using a 10.5 US and an 11 needle. And it gives us all the abbreviations. It tells me what the stitch pattern is. It gives me information about before I start, probably letting me know I need to check my gauge. Using Floofy Chunky yarn. Wow, okay. Please check yarn requirements. It gives me an estimated amount of yarn that I'm going to need for this. So this is doing that there. So Stashbot does it as well, and this does it within the app as well. And then at the very bottom here, you can see that it gives me a row counter, and then it tells me which section I'm currently working on. Okay, that's very cool. And then a schematic. It gives me the schematic of the sweater. Holy moly. Okay, I could get carried away with this, but I don't want to get lost in all of that. That is really cool. I played with that a little bit to kind of get the gist of it because I had heard about it, and I thought that that was really awesome the first time I played with it. But having the schematic there and then the row counter and all of the details in there, plus being able to estimate how much yarn you're going to need, you guys, that's awesome. So that is called Knits That Fit app. You do have to pay for it, but it may be worth a one-time fee to have it in your little virtual digital toolbox, if you will. Okay, the bonus resource I wanted to mention here when it comes to coming up with your own individualized sock pattern is another one I've talked about in the past, and that is another article from Knitty called Socks 101 by the lovely and illustrious Kate Atherley. She is a fantastic sock knitwear designer, and I love this article. This is the article that took me from an apprehensive sock knitter to a full-fledged, confident, go for it sock knitter who has no fear of knitting socks. Now, I'm not a prolific sock knitter by any means, but I have no fear of knitting socks, and that's because of this article. She lays it all out for you here, giving you the formula, the math, the construction options for knitting your very first pair of socks that are going to fit your feet. If you want to start knitting your own socks and then maybe go toy with stitch patterns and developing your own sock pattern, start here. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. It's such a fabulous resource for knitting your very own individualized pair of socks, especially if it's a first pair of socks or you're a first-time sock knitter. So that is Socks 101, and you can find it on knitty.com, and it's by Kate Atherley. All right, guys, that is it for me today. I hope you find those resources helpful. I hope they give you a good push and start to your individualized sweater journey, because it's really something you need to try. And I'm telling you, these are really great places to start. If you have any other suggestions, if you've gone through this experience and developed your own library of online resources that you would like to share with us, leave them down below in the comment section. If there are any books that you would like to share there, then definitely leave those down in the comment section as well. And like I said, there is a video coming up very soon where I dive into my favorite books for helping you individualize, modify, and improvise your own sweater patterns. All of that is coming very soon. But in the meantime, if you took anything away from today's video or enjoyed yourself, please don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Definitely subscribe, and you can click that bell icon so that you can be notified anytime I upload new content. And if you would like to help support the work that I'm doing here at the Wool Needles Hands channel, head over to Patreon. You can join for free for additional content over there. But if you would like to financially support the channel, you can become a paying member, and there are lots of really great perks for doing just that. And I thank you so very much. Until we meet again for Sunday's episode of the podcast, happy knitting, happy making, happy whatever it is that you're doing. Take care, be well, and I will see you soon. Bye.